Greeting friends, I am Professor Namita Rajput, Professor in Department of Commerce, Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. In the ongoing series of corporate governance, today we are talking on international codes. As in the first half we have discussed about the international codes, the impact, implementation, characteristics, challenges which are faced in the implementation of these international codes. In this particular session, we will be talking about some other expanded aspects relating to international codes. So, let us discuss the future trends and the developments in the international codes. The future of international codes in the corporate governance and compliance is shaped by evolving the global trends, technological advancements and increasing the shareholder expectations. So, here are some key trends and the developments which is expected to influence the international codes in the coming years. The first is increased focus on environmental, social and governance criteria. The ESG factors are becoming increasingly important to the investors, regulators and the other shareholders. The development. The international codes are likely to incorporate more comprehensive ESG reporting requirements, emphasizing sustainability, social responsibility and the governance practices. The companies will be expected to disclose their impact on the environment, their contributions to the social welfare and their governance structures. The technological advancements and the digital transformation. The first is your trend. The rapid advancement of the technology is transforming the business operations and the corporate governance. Next is your development. The international codes will likely influence the provisions that address the cyber security, data privacy and the ethical use of the artificial intelligence and the other emerging technologies. The companies will be encouraged to adopt the digital tools for compliance, risk management and the stakeholder engagement, enhance stakeholders engagement and inclusive governance. There is a growing recognition of the importance of engaging a broader range of stakeholders in the corporate governance. The future international codes will emphasize basically on inclusive governance practices, ensuring that the interest of the governance, cultural suppliers, communities and other stakeholders are considered in the corporate decision making process. The global harmonization of the governance standards. As the business operate in increasingly global market, there is a push for harmonizing the corporate governance standards across the different jurisdictions. The development. Efforts to align the international codes such as those by OECD, International Organization of Security Commission and the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation will continue to promote the consistency and the comparability in the corporate governance practices worldwide. The integration of the risk management and the corporate governance. The effective risk management is becoming a central component and the good corporate governance. The development. The future international codes will integrate the risk management framework into the corporate governance guidelines, encouraging the companies to adopt proactive risk identification, assessment and mitigation strategies. Increased accountability and transparency. The stakeholders are demanding a higher levels of transparency and accountability from the corporations. The international codes will continue to strengthen the disclosure requirement, mandating a detailed reporting on the financial performance, executive compensation, board composition and the compliance with the governance standards. The focus on board diversity and the competence. The diverse and the competent boards are seen as a crucial and critical for effective governance. The future international codes will emphasize the need for the board diversity in terms of gender, ethnicity, skills and experience. They will also stress the importance of the continuous education and evaluation of the board members to ensure that they possess the necessary expertise to guide the company. The sustainability and the long-term value creation. There is a shift towards a long-term value creation and the sustainable business practice. The international codes will provide the strategies that focus on the long-term growth, resilience and sustainability. The companies will be encouraged to move beyond a short-term financial performance and consider the broader impact on society and the environment. The regulatory innovation and collaboration. The regulatory bodies are exploring the innovation approaches to the governance and the compliance. The collaborative efforts between the regulators, industry bodies and the companies will lead to the development of more flexible and adaptive governance framework. The regulatory sandboxes and the pilot programs may be used to test the new governance models and the practices. The ethical leadership and the corporate culture. The ethical leadership and a strong corporate culture are increasingly recognized as a foundational to the good governance. The international codes will place a greater emphasis on the role of ethical leadership in shaping the corporate culture, promoting the integrity and fostering a sense of responsibility towards all the shareholders. Now, these trends and developments, they highlight the dynamic nature of the corporate governance and the need for international codes to evolve continuously to address the emerging challenges and the opportunities. By staying ahead of these trends, the companies can enhance their governance practices, build the trust, and the stakeholders can achieve the sustainable success in a rapidly changing global environment. So, basically what we have to do and what we have to understand in terms of the international standards, what have been under the play and how the different adjustments, changes the companies have to do in order to respect the international codes. So, basically we have seen that there have been a long good challenges which are there for the OECD and the other aspects of the management, that they have to understand and implement these principles as far as the OECD is concerned, as far as the Oxley Act is concerned. There are definitely some enforcement mechanisms which needs to be very, very stringent, and these stringent requirements, they have to enhance the corporate governance, financial transparency and accountability. When these financial accounting etc., when the accounting scandals happen, then of course we see a strong need of such mechanism, owing to which the transparency will be enhanced and the scandals have to be clutched. So, there is a significant penalty which has to be imposed on the companies, because if they continue doing the misconduct or the wrong practices, there is a chance that definitely the corporate scandals will be on the upsurge and the transparency of the company will be at bay, and the trust will not be a trust factor, it will be a mistrust factor, owing to these scandals, owing to these misconducts, owing to these under functionalities and the misfunctionalities which happen, and they are on the upsurge as far as the global scenario is concerned. So, that is why we have these international codes for the corporate governance, that we have to strictly apply these principles and we have to make the internal systems more better, more coordinated in order to stop these misconduct happenings which are definitely happening across the globe. So, there is definitely, if these principles are on the head of the companies, then there is definitely a part which is there, that they will always have this kind of a scare in the mind, that if they do not follow these codes, if they do not follow these principles which are there for all the companies to follow, then of course they will have to face the consequences, they have to face the music as far as the non-compliance of these international codes are concerned. So, definitely these enforcement mechanisms collectively, they have to ensure that all the executives, they adhere to these stringent requirements and enhancing the corporate governance, financial transparency and the accountability. So, there are both the consequences what they have to face, they are of two types. One is civil in nature and the other is criminal in nature. So, both are the strong deterrents which are definitely be there if there is a non-compliance as far as the non-compliance of following these international codes are concerned. So, definitely these international codes as far as the Oxley Act and as far as the OECD principles are concerned, they definitely have to be structured and internalized in the corporate governance structures, because if they are not there, they have to face the music as far as the non-compliance is concerned. So, definitely the implementation part as far as the Oxley Act and the OECD principles are concerned, they are actually posing some kind of a serious challenges on the companies, and as far as the implementation challenges are concerned, there are a lot of issues because it is not a simple code to be implemented and the simple codes to be implemented as far as the Surveillance Oxley Act and the OECD principles are concerned. Definitely, there are some regulatory and the legal differences across the various framework, owing to which the implementation and the adaptability of these international codes becomes a very difficult things, because there are national laws also, and we have to see that the national laws clauses and the international codes, they are not in contrary to each other, or they do not stand against each other. In fact, one is complementing the other. So, we have to see the structure of the national law and the structure of the international law together in one frame. So, that becomes a very serious challenge for the companies to follow these OECD and the Oxley Act principle is concerned, which was enacted in 2002. So, the countries need to customize and implement these principles which are aligning with these national legal context with a very deep analysis and adaptation. Now, I would like to mention here that when you talk about internalizing or implementing the international codes, whether it is an OECD or the Surveillance Oxley Act is concerned, you have to be very particular about the analysis of your own country. That is, you have to see the national perspective and then see what the international code says, and then you have to sync both of them very carefully with a strong adaptation rate, with a strong adaptation matrix, so that after a careful analysis and the international adaptation matrix is concerned, the implementation of the international code becomes a big success. Not only about the legal differences, we have certain other issues also which poses a very heavy challenge, and as far as the implementation part is concerned, that is the cultural differences. The corporate governance practices are definitely, they are charged by the cultural norms and the values, and when you talk about the culture of any country, they are very different across the nation, owing to which the implementation of straight the international code as far as the corporate governance is concerned also poses a big challenge. And because the principles which are respected in one country may not be respected in the other country, and then of course the terminology, the perspective, the narration, the explanation will be different across the nations when you talk about the nationality, when you talk about the cultural perspective is concerned. So, then what you talk about the solution? The solution is that you have to deeply understand that what particular principles are there as far as the international principles are concerned, as far as the national principles are concerned. You have to rate them on one scale. You have to see that what kind of bases are there owing to which they are originated, and what are the principles for the national perspective and how they are generated. And then you have to see in one frame that you have to actually implement these guidelines, these principles, these codes, whether it is an Oxley part is concerned or the OECD part is concerned, in a very culturally sensitive manner. So, if you understand the culture of the country or the sensitivity of the country is concerned, you cannot bypass the cultural sensitivity as far as the implementation of these international codes and principles are concerned. The next important challenge when you talk about the implementation of the OECD principles is concerned is the limited resources what you have. So, definitely any country has its own resources. Some countries are labor intensive, some countries are capital intensive. So, there is a resource perspective of each country. So, definitely when you talk about implementation of these international codes of the corporate governance principles are concerned, we have to be very sure about the resource framework before we understand, internalize, implement and understand these international codes are concerned. So, we have to see that whether a particular country is resource intensive in one aspect and not intensive in the other. So, that is one of the resource constraint which plays a very pivotal role as far as the playing ground of implementation of the OECD and the Auxiliary Act principles are concerned. There are smaller companies, there are larger companies, there are developed countries, there are developing countries. So, when you talk about the different perspective of the different countries, of the different nations, of the different nationalities, the resource intensiveness differs, it varies from country to country. So, you have to make a framework, you have to understand the implementation matrix in that respect. So, you need to train the perspective as far as the financial support is concerned, as far as the internal capacity building program is concerned, that how the necessary changes can be made to make the implementation part of these international codes a big success. Then of course, when you talk about another challenge, when you talk about the implementation part of the international principles and the codes of the corporate governance is concerned, then of course we have a biggest challenge of implementation of the board independence. So, we have to ensure that independent board is there, because if the board is independent, then you can take a necessary step, an expertise step, a fundamental step in order to have a big and a successful implementation of these international codes. If the board is not independent, then everything will be qualified and will be very, very difficult to implement, because otherwise you will have a problem in implementation of these international codes, which is definitely a precondition for the successful corporate governance of the different companies in the international arena is concerned. Then you have to develop a complete structure where the educational training programs are actually aligned and they actually address these challenges in a very, very important manner. And of course, there is a big process and the issues as far as the implementation of these OECD principles are concerned is about the disclosure and transparency. Now, we have seen in the previous sessions that there have been a lot of corporate scandal issues, shareholder activism, the board independence, the committees. So, all these things are actually very interconnected and they are internally woven in terms of the disclosure and the transparency. Because if we do not understand and implement the disclosure and the transparency, then of course the issues will be more complex and we will have a lot of issues as far as the implementation of these international codes are concerned, and people will have an issue about the competitive disadvantage, the privacy and the complexity of the information required to be disclosed. Then of course, we need to streamline, we need to make some very crystal clear guidelines in this regard, and of course, we are living in a era of artificial intelligence, machine learning. So, we have to talk about a solution which is technology enabled. Definitely, if we implement these technology enabled issues, we are going to streamline the reporting mechanism, the reporting process, and ensure that there is a transparency to the substantial extent without overwhelming the companies. Then of course, we have to engage the shareholders to the substantial extent, because if they are active, if they are engaged, so there is a less probability that the scandals will happen, because on each and every step what the company is taking, they will have a very good eye on that, and they will have an ethical lens to see whether the activities are moving in a right perspective or not, and whether the situation is qualified or not, and whether it is a clean environment or not. So, if you have a strong structured stakeholder engagement framework in place, then there will be a lot of open communication, there will be a meaningful dialogue, owing to which the corporate governance practices will be in control and they will be under a process wherein the implementation will be a big success. Then of course, we will be talking about the compliance and the enforcement. We have to make a system such that the implementation part is the strongest, and the weak regulatory framework have to be refuted to a strongest extent, and the enforcement capabilities of internalizing the corporate governance system and the international framework implementation has to be extremely strong. So, we need to strong and strengthen these systems and do some adequate resources for the enforcement, which can enhance the compliance, international cooperation and the peer reviews, which can also support the effective implementation to a best extent. You need to balance your short term and the long term goals, maintaining a focus that what needs to be focused at what time and what needs to be delivered at what time. If there is a disbalance between the positions of the short term and the long term goals, there will be a big problem as far as the implementation part is concerned. So, we need to strike a trade off between these loans, these goals, and of course, the companies with established practices which have a very clear vision about this is what steps I have to cover in the short run, and this is the mileage which I have to cover in the long run, which is going to be a big success. But yes, if the things are not in place and if there is a strong probability of disintegration or disalignment between the short term and the long term goals, so it is going to affect the existing system and the process to a best possible extent. So, as far as possible, we have to maintain a balance between a short term and the long term goals and a trade off between the them. So, we need to do this process in a very gradual manner. You cannot jump to a short term to a long term. There has to be a very short term transitioning, a very gradual transitioning, a very small step implementation in this framework, so that we have a very smooth, a strong and a long journey in this regard. For this, we have to have a very strong and a monitoring evaluation system in place, which is definitely a very necessary condition for the continuous improvement, which needs to challenge the subjective mechanism, and we have to maintain, internalize a strong objective evaluation process to make the system a best system in place. We need to also have a robust monitoring system in place and can maintain the objectivity and the consistency of the evaluations to the best possible extent. So, we need to address all these issues in one frame, so that the companies, regulators, stakeholders, they play a very vital role in the way they want. So, by tailoring and implementing the OECD principles to the local context and providing the adequate resources and support, fostering a culture of transparency and accountability, the organizations can actually overcome these challenges and enhance their corporate governance framework. So, definitely we have to see that what the future will be. So, there are definitely a lot of changes which are happening around the globe, as far as the board management, as far as their compensation, as far as their audit process, shareholder activism, shareholder expectations, technology advancements, then implementation of these framework, then stress on environmental, social governance practices are concerned. So, they are actually moving with the blink of an eye. So, when we are living in a very dynamic environment which is changing on a blink of an eye, so you also have to be very proactive in reporting requirements, in emphasizing aspects in terms of what needs to be incorporated as far as the reporting on the ESG index is concerned, that is the social responsibility, sustainable practices, governance practices, they are all going into a sea change. So, the expectations from the public is that the companies must have a full disclosure that what are they doing on the environmental impact, on the social impact, on the governance structures, because together these three things are very important. They are like the diamonds, and the people peep into the company and they see what environment, social and the governance practices the company is following. Are the companies also advancing on the digital platforms, on the advancement of the technology? Because the companies which are not adhering to these changes, advancements, then the company definitely will become a Titanic. So, in order to reduce or clutch these mishappenings, misfortunes, or decline as far as the success is concerned, these international codes likely to address these cybersecurities, data privacy, and the ethical use of the artificial intelligence as far as the emerging technologies are concerned. So, we have to see all the aspects in one frame, and all the aspects have to be in one line, and the companies should be encouraged to adopt these digital tools, compliance, risk management, and the company advancement in this step will be considered a good step in making the good corporate decision making process, in order to keep all the stakeholders very, very happy, in order to have a very harmonized global governance structures, and the efforts to align the international codes such as those of OECD, that is International Organization of Security Commissions, that is IOSCO, and IFRS, that is the International Financial Reporting System. We are going to make and place the company on a path which is going to only see the consistent growth worldwide. So, we need to integrate the risk management system, the effective trends in place, and developing some proactive mechanism, matrix, assessment, and the strategies to counter these changes and meet the international demand as far as the transparency, accountability of the organizations and the corporations are concerned. Thank you very much.